business, to economy, to politics, to technology. And that's all we do here on Newspunch, from the beginning to the end. And that is why we are there. Keep watching Newspunch from there.
Good evening, viewers. Welcome to today's edition of Newspunch. Today, my name is Chukwudemabuko. Today, we'll be discussing about the state of violence across the world. We zero in on what's happened recently in Sri Lanka. We are on Easter Sunday. Some now confirmed to be terrorists bombed several churches and hotels. In the process, killing about or more than 300 persons. And the world is aghast because of that. And also we visit Nigeria, where a similar thing is happening almost on a daily basis. Recently, a British aid worker was counted among those killed or kidnapped and then later killed by people identified as hoodlums. And apart from that, in Kaduna State, where the British aid worker was killed, they have been on the news for long because of incessant killings between what they call herders and farmers and other religious motivated killings. Since the beginning of this year, more than 1,000 people have been killed in Nigeria alone. So the international community also, as they mourn the dead in Sri Lanka, should also focus on Nigeria. And I believe that with the death of the British citizen in Kaduna, the international community will now ask what is happening in our country, because every day we have reports of people being killed, either by the policemen, security agencies, and individuals. So Nigeria is gradually heading towards what they call a failed state, because no one seems to be reacting or doing what they're supposed to do to stem the spate of killings. With me to discuss this issue today, I have with me in the studio two personalities. On my immediate left, I have Patience Patrick, a barrister at law. Welcome.
Thank you.
On my extreme left, I have one of our regulars here, Kingsley Onyemenem. Is also a barrister, a solicitor of KC Law Chamber Solicitors Limited. Mr. Onyemenem,
thank you.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are talking about the violence, particularly the most recent one happened in Sri Lanka, and more than 300 people have been confirmed to have died in that incident. What is your take? How did you react when you had something like that happened?
I think it's quite a sad event, but if you perhaps look at the history of those who, the political scenario in Sri Lanka has been over the years. The problem with the Tamil Tigers and the rest of it. The recent incident that happened was quite, it's unfortunate. The needless loss of life, but those individuals who are from the same country and tourists. It was quite sad. It was quite sad, but I think there's need for the international community to have a serious look and try and find a solution where the government of the region is unable to do so, and try and stem the spate of killings that is happening, not just in Sri Lanka but all around the world. This is the issue of terrorism has been one that is almost overcoming the entire legal state, as it were.
Yeah, Patience, talking about violence, let's zero in on Nigeria. not long ago, or even at this, almost at the same time, a British aid worker was kidnapped in Kaduna, in Kajuru local government. And later we heard she was killed. What do you think about how do you react to that?
First, I must say, may the souls of the departed in Sri Lanka and, of course, in Nigeria rest in peace. And, of course, we empathize with those that have been devastated by careless and baseless loss. I think there's really no one panacea for violence, and it's a mixture of several things. It's whether or not there's enough deterrent, it's whether or not there's enough reason, because it takes some sense of hopelessness for you to get engaged in certain things. And sometimes I find that there's all kinds of rage, and sometimes people are not given adequate opportunity to express it. So sometimes even our policing speech, in a manner of speaking, thinking it will help us, doesn't really help us. Because sometimes it would be better if we could find what is inside. And then you then have the government. What's the government doing, for instance? We all, at least I know of the issue of the headsmen and all of that. There's always that element of political bias. Of course, religion is the opium of the masses, as they say. And so I think there's a need for people to be given hope and people to see a future that violence cannot buy, both a future for themselves as individuals and a future for the country as a whole. I'm one of those, I'm an eternal optimist in my country. I believe that things will get better one day, but at the same time, I do recognize the sheer desperation sometimes people are moved by without justification to engage in some things. And whether we like it or not, sometimes they're being pumped up by religious sentiments.
Yes, okay. Religious sentiments. How would you, Kingsley, how would you react? How has government intervened in this area? What should be the role of government in stemming the tide of killings, particularly in Nigeria now?
I think the duty falls back on the leaders, our leaders. Nigeria as it is, there's about 36 states in that country. There's, people of different ethnicity, different religion. But we know obviously the majority is you have the Christians and you have the Muslims. And this spate of violence has always been, from those who say that they're either of one religion against the other. Now, I think perhaps there is need for us to understand, for us to be made to understand that no one religion is better than the other. If we're saying that we're serving an almighty God, whether you're a Christian or whether you're a Muslim, I don't think our God commands us to kill the next man for the simple purpose that I am better than the other person. I think it's important for, I think that's like Patience has outlined earlier on. Those people who engage in this, I believe that there were behind them people who either instigate or encourage them. And many of these people, if they have a sense of loss, or if they have something that they would perhaps stand to lose if they engage in this act, perhaps they might not engage in it. I think education is important. I think educating the masses is important. Empowering these individuals is also very important. And I think most of these people who engage in this, in the northern part of Nigeria, we know that a lot of the individuals either don't go to school. And a lot of them also depend and rely on those who are the helms of affairs. Perhaps if you're able to provide a means of, self-sufficiency to the man at the lowest ebb of the ladder, then he might consider whether the point of religious superiority is something that he would want to actually advocate on behalf of himself or others.
Okay, we underline the role of religion in most of the violence in Nigeria. But at a different dimension, on a different level, we would also remember that there are many killings that are political, and they also generate a kind of violence.
That's correct.
For example, yesterday or 2 days ago, somewhere in Osun or Ogun State, because of political rivalry, a group of the opposing party had to burn down the office of the deputy speaker, and in the process burning down about 3 or 4 vehicles. So we should also put in context that apart from the role religion plays in violence, the issue of politics is also another thing.
That's correct.
That brings us to the issue of Boko Haram. It's also causing a kind of decimating lives in Nigeria. Over the past almost 6 years now, they have been there. And nothing is being done or seems to be done apart from propaganda that they have been technically defeated. Still they are coming up, ambushing soldiers, killing people, sacking villages. How should Nigerian leadership respond? Because these people have sponsors. For example, when Boko Haram came up from Borno State, it was rumored that one of the political leaders of Borno State, whom I don't want to call his name, was the arrowhead of Boko Haram. He formed Boko Haram. He didn't give him that Boko Haram name. He formed that group as a bulwark for him to be re-elected as governor. No, to the position he wanted to come back as governor. So he saw that the only way he could wrestle power from the center, because he was from a different political party from what we have in the center, he had to form that vigilante group, to secure his mandate. At a point, he sponsored this group, and they helped him really to come back to power. Now, it's one thing to arm somebody, another is to take the arm away from the person. So when he became governor, there was no need for him to have those people again. But they have now grown, because they have gone. So because they were not getting what he was giving them, they had to, transform to become Boko Haram that we see today. If we had a strong government, wouldn't that have been stopped at the inception?
I think the answer to the question is yes. And the Nigerian military is a well-respected sector, not just in Nigeria but all around the world. Issues that happen within Africa, we spearhead it. We're called in both by the foreign governments to intervene and settle disputes, and where necessary use force to bring matters to an amicable end. And we've successfully done that in other countries. And I know over the period of this point of Boko Haram, people have said, well, Nigerian military is ill-equipped. They're not, well-trained. I don't believe in that. I think we have what it takes within the military to actually defeat Boko Haram. But like you said, it may be the case that there are those with ulterior motives. And it may also be the case that this particular sect has political backing. And perhaps that's why the issue of defeat has not, totally been realized. But it's not an impossibility. And I don't believe it's such a massive organization as it's been made out to be. But I think the Nigerian army is capable of actually defeating Boko Haram. Whether they're going to do it or not becomes a very different issue. There has to be a will from the government to actually actualize that. Yeah,
because a former Nigerian leader said that if an insurrection lasts for more than 24 hours, that government knows about it. That's what he said.
Yes.
If it lasts more than 24 hours, government knows about it. And now, patience. Why has it been possible for Nigeria's military? Because he said Nigeria has a record of working outside the country, its military, and then bringing back good results. Why have they been? Why has it been impossible for the Nigerian military to overcome Boko Haram? And then maybe if the police is failing, take over and then decimate all these pockets of violence and killings in Nigeria.
Well, I take the view that I wouldn't say that there has been no improvement in the war against terror in Nigeria. I would think, in my opinion, that Boko Haram as a problem has been overtaken by the headsmen. And if you asked me, as someone living in Nigeria, what is the #1 crisis in terms of violence, I'll tell you headsmen and the incessant killing in the Middle Belt and some parts of the north and all of that. I think that similar to almost everything, it's a little bit of everything. First, I think that the appointments in the military, sometimes the way they send out soldiers is lopsided. We hear of horror stories of people being asked to stay beyond the time limit they are meant to stay when they are posted to their various places of assignment. Of course, we're all aware of the fact that there were not enough equipment. In fact, at some point, it was said that it was the West, that this was under the former president, that prevented those equipments coming. And we heard of the scandal recently about the, I think, $1 billion over monies that ought to have been released. But I think that if we really wanted to do it, we could do it. Like you said, I've had the opportunity to speak with soldiers. When they speak of their tours in other African countries, there's such gallantry. It leaks from their voices, literally, like, this is what we've been able to achieve, this is how good we are. I remember a soldier telling me that they are that good because they are used to suffering, so they can survive, in any conditions and all of that. But I think that as a government, we need to be more constructive, and we need to ask ourselves, what are other countries doing right? How can we better use the cyberspace, the satellite systems, the navigation systems? I don't see why any part of Nigeria cannot be monitored by helicopters that are flying overboard and all of that. And again, I think an important part that has not been explored is intelligence gathering in its finest form. I was telling, I was talking about this habit sometimes of maybe a kidnapper is caught and the kidnapper is killed. Maybe we should consider getting people like that to work on the inside. I was looking at a program recently. They were releasing some Boko Haram people that they had gone through a program and all of that. And my question was, why don't you bring these people in? Not just to give you intelligence, but to work from the inside. They understand the workings of all of it. Because as long as we're where we are as a society, there's a market for it. So it's not like we're automatically going to get to Eureka and all of a sudden it will be a situation of, oh no, we're done because you've destroyed everywhere, you've cleared the forest. No. As long as there's a market for it, you need people that understand these dynamics and how it works. And again, people need to know that there is hope. People need to have a value on their lives. Sometimes it's desperation. I can't imagine you in any circumstance. There's certain things people tell you. You look at your life, you have something to live for. Or even if you want to die early, like I sometimes say, it still will not take away from the importance of the value you place while you're alive and of the value you place on others. I think that the government needs to also speak out more vigorously against any sense of tolerance from our pulpits, whether from our imams or whatever. We need to speak out clearly on those. It must be tackled all around. And don't forget, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Nigerians would tell you we don't commit suicide, if you recall. it was an anathema. You couldn't imagine. It didn't make sense to us. Well, what kind of senseless, rubbish is that? So we need to go back to those systems. What has changed? What has become so bad? What role are the elites playing? What role is government doing? What kind of civic education are people getting? Who is checking what is being done? Again, back to intelligence gathering. People should get into the mosque. People should get into the churches. People should be everywhere. They should know what is being told of these people. And of course, there has to be that willpower. There's a lot of times when these issues come up, whether it's Fulani headsmen, you hear undertone of religion. In my opinion, that's utter card. And the issues of life ought to be so serious that religious sentiments ought to take a back burner, and we should focus on that. So government should be ready. Again, for instance, how many convictions have we had? Imagine if we had, say, 500 convictions since, and all those that had been convicted, they had gone in for time, which of course then shifts the blame to us being part of the judicial system, the slow grind of the judicial processes. Then it takes us back to the police. Are they equipped to investigate? Are they willing to investigate? And of course, corruption. Can you bribe away evidence?
Sorry, thank you so much. You are taking us in a good summary of what is happening. I have a caller on the line. Augustine from London. Hello.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Augustine. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and just I think for me, following most of these discussions, I hear a lot of explanations and how we can move forward and how this problem can be resolved. I think Nigeria is intelligent enough, and then the people, our leaders, it's not the lack of knowing what to do, is that they bluntly refuse to do what is right. So we don't really need magic to get these things done. The problem is that the same people who are supposed to resolve it are also contributing to these problems. That's what we are facing. And so if we have leaders with integrity, leaders who have passion for their people, who have respect for our people, and we don't have respect all over the world, even in our country. We are not valued, we don't have respect, they don't think we have, we are part of human race in so many instances. And so what we need is leaders with integrity and leaders who really love their people, and we pay the price. I don't think that they need to be educated. They know what to do, but they don't just want to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Augustine. You want to make...
I was, I think the gentleman who called has made a very valid point. If we look at the case of Rwanda and what happened between the Tutsis, where almost 8 million people were killed, if we reverse back today and we see where that particular country is, they're there today and they're doing brilliant well. The sins of yesterday, the crimes and the kings of yesterday have almost been not necessarily forgotten, but there is, a consensus
that new life has been breathed into
new
them,
life, you understand? And the governments of that particular country are willing to work, and they are working towards making that country realize its true potentials. And it's not impossible. When I think about Nigeria of the last 15 years or 20 years, it amazes me. It's as if I'm having a nightmare. I can't begin to understand how we've suddenly got to where we are today. And it's so very disheartening. And I have to be sincere. I think those who are leading that country, they have to take responsibility. There's no other way. And until they do so, Nigeria would not get better.
Yes, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, but that's which is part of the challenge. And I'm always concerned by this habit of politicians dashing people money so that we'll vote for them, promising the more elites. They wouldn't offer me and Kingsley 5,000 or 10,000. They'll probably offer us appointments and all of that to vote for us, because it's a whole system. So how do you even get the good leaders in? So how do you get the competent ones, those with proper value? They can't compete with the mess. And I think it's actually deliberate. As long as you keep people down, you keep them desperate at a certain level, they are willing to do anything. They will vote, with all due respect, sometimes ragamuffins, sometimes all sorts will get into office. People that either have no clue or have no, they just lack the ability to withstand it. It's only when our system can throw up people with integrity, with value system, that we can then, okay, look at what goes on, look at the Senate, look at the issue of trumped-up charges, look at the war against corruption, for instance. Nobody's complaining, but the greatest complaint against the war against corruption is clear bias, and that's what everybody, nobody's saying don't fight corruption. So everything is intertwined, it's interconnected, and sometimes the people that do this violence, it's not the politicians' children when it comes to political violence. Their children are in Oxford, in Cambridge, in King's College. Hardly would even find any of them in Ghana. Their children are abroad. It is those children that they make to believe are not worth more than 2,000. I've heard of people speak of how sometimes what you can purchase with 40,000. It's amazing how much you need to give people sometimes to come to political rallies, how cheap people can be bought. There's a running joke sometimes that you can pay someone 5K, 10K if you want to kill someone in some areas and all of that. It shouldn't be so. People should have something to look. If you empower people properly, people have a better understanding. I think that will help. But I don't see how integrity will help us if we don't have a system that even throws up good leaders. And sometimes there's an unwillingness to even get the job done, even when people are in those places of authority.
Okay, talking about good leaders or good leadership, are we in the run for a good leader in Nigeria? It's like every day, everybody you ask, we talk, like Kola said, he's talking about identified leadership, that they know what to do and they're not doing it. How do we get good leadership in Nigeria?
I think from what patients have said, it's about having the structure in place first. If we don't have a good structure in place, we don't have a workable structure in place, it doesn't matter how many good leaders you throw in there. We have a congregation of corrupt individuals.
So how do we get this structure?
Imagine, I mean, we've had instances where people from the diaspora have gone home with clear thoughts and good intentions of what they're looking to bring, to change the dynamics. But they get there and they become lost, almost. Because how do you fight a system that has been set up to exclude and to maintain a particular framework, which is corruption, which is literally to protect the interest of those who are there to govern us, not the masses that are being governed. So I think we need to start from the structure. We need to start from putting things in place that would allow this to be workable, so that when a leader comes up, he can be able to work and effectively perform his duties.
I have hope that we can actually start from somewhere.
So where do we start?
We get in key legislation and we face reality. And what is that reality? That there's no saint. So, as a professor of law of blessed memory once said, he came up with this amazing proposal. I saw sense in it. And he said, because of the pervasiveness of corruption, set a time limit for everybody in the country. It's similar to when the late President Yar'Adua came into power and he said, oh, I know the process that brought me was mad with irregularities. And he set up a panel to look at it and all of that. Start from, as you that you're in power, start from admitting, oh, we're not perfect. My cabinet is not perfect. But unless we do something, this thing will drown us. So once you come first to that admission, and then you set it up, you know that you're setting up a new template entirely. And then let everybody be equal before the law. No favors, no cushions. But the most important thing is the willpower. And then sometimes you have, you know, as they say, a little oil sells the rest of the fingers. If it's only you in there, people should team up. This idea of, I must be the leader, I must be my political party. No. And that was part of what people were saying at the last election. If you want to give APC or PDP a run for their money, why don't you come together, build up something strong? In the process, you may even get some disenchanted members of PDP, of APC that have similar mindset. Build something, at least now Nigerians, a few of them, I have people coming from the US, from the UK to vote. People are coming back to vote. Build something that works, that is able to challenge the system. And then if people see you're serious, I think Nigerians believe that they don't, if they see that seriousness and they see that the government means business, everybody will change. Like I always say, when we say the government is corrupt, it's all of us. It's our civil service, it's our bankers, it's our doctors, it's our lawyers. It's a corporate problem. We must all fix it. And I think another thing is, it starts also in how we do things in each of our spheres. So if you're a policeman, how do you police? If you're a lawyer, how do you do your law? I mean, even if you're clergy, how do you preach? Are you giving enough messages to pinch somebody? Because these politicians are in the churches, they're in the mosque, you know. So it's a little bit of everything, I guess. But I know it's possible to set up a structure.
Yeah, but the thing is that who will do it? Because for example, we have mainly two political parties in Nigeria today.
Yes.
And like most countries that have developed, they came through their political party system because it is given to them to bring up leadership.
Yes.
You know, but in our own case, like somebody was saying yesterday, one Nigerian politician said that what we are having today compared to what we have under Awolowo, Zik, and Jakonde is quite different because at that time ideas ruled.
Yes.
But now money is the main thing. You know, so when you give somebody 500 naira, the person can commit murder on your behalf in Nigeria. So how do we get to come out of that kind of situation where people don't worship money? Because without money, everything you see in Nigeria today is about money. If you go to the church, they're talking about money. Every pastor in Nigeria wants to buy jets. That is the Indian now. You know, so every politician wants to become a billionaire. That is the Indian now. You know, so and then the followership, they don't care. Talk to maybe somebody who oppressed. Talk to him that your oppressor, that person you are defending is your oppressor. He will want to lynch you.
Yes.
You know, so how do we? Because in that kind of system, we can't do much. For example, one of those presidential candidates last time who didn't win anything, but it was if you look at his program, he could articulate Nigeria's problem and how to solve it. But he was nowhere near the office. Now, he was saying that all that he was saying, after telling them ideas, how he can put you to work, what they asked him after is, what is money? What are you giving us? At the end of the day, he was frustrated. So how do we overcome all this?
It's a very difficult question, but if you think about it, a man who hasn't eaten square meals a day, or who's just had one, or can't even afford to have one, it's rather difficult, especially when he's lived in, year out, and he's got children who he has to take care of. And he's used to looking forward to maybe 5,000 or 10,000 naira. Not even 10,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But let's say 3,000 or 5,000 naira towards an election. It's difficult for you to sell him the idea of change, of I can provide you a better governance. Especially when he's heard over the years of people who've come forward with similar ideas, and yet he ends up in the same position. That is what is affecting most candidates, or some candidates who have the best of intentions, and who obviously have workable programs. We do have to have something in place. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for somebody who comes in with all the best ideas and workable formulas, but yet he's trying to get into a structure that has been put there to prevent workable ideas because that's what it is. If Nigerians tomorrow, if we have a government for the next 8 years that tries to balance the equation amongst the rich and the poor, or at least allow those who are poor and destitute to have a certain level of livelihood, people's mindset will start changing, because it's what you used to that you actually look forward to. Do you understand? So people's mindset, I think, would begin to change, because if I'm used to, say, having 3 square meals a day, and all of a sudden I have a candidate who's telling me, or who's come to governance, and then I'm having one, I would want to vote him out at the next election. So we do have to have a structure, and it's that structure and the legislation that would help us. You have to have a legislation, you have to have the means to enforce that legislation. Because if we can see consequences of, if we can get consequences of their action, let's say a governor goes in there and squanders the state's resources, and he's sent 20 years in prison. The next governor who's going to go in there will be careful. Absolutely. He might not necessarily squander, but he will perform to a greater extent for his people.
That is not happening in Nigeria.
And that's the problem. That's where we I think, to an extent, I'm one of those who believe that we do have the legislations, many of them in place, but what we don't have is the will to enforce it, both from the police and the judiciary. Quite unfortunate. So for me, if you ask me the question, I'm not sure how I can propose a solution.
Well, I think it's actually, I remember a candidate I'll mention the state and leave it at that, in Kaduna, wanted to run for office. And he was sharing this story, and he says he wants to run, and you know the normal Nigerians, what will you do for me, how much will you give me, how much will you do this? So what he did, he literally did almost a one-on-one contract with the people. So you have a choice. You take this money now, I don't do anything for you as constituents, and we're even. Or you let me go in, hold me to my word, this is what you're to provide, do like a schedule. It worked for him. At least he ran, I think he did a 4-year or 8-year term. Then he became one of the commissioners in the state. So again, is also the approach to campaigns sometimes. I think people need to do that personal touch. Is it not fascinating that Donald Trump, who is a billionaire, is able to convince people that make $100 to give him donations and all of that? Whatever you say about him, you cannot take away his ability to stay in touch with people. That's going to everywhere, every rally and all of that. Come to talk to people, go around. Electioneering is not cheap, and by cheap I don't even mean financially. You must make up your mind, and literally you and your team, there's no how if you are consistent. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. It may be another 4-year cycle, maybe another 8-year cycle. If you team up, you get the right set, you sell, because everybody in Nigeria recognizes there's a problem. From the woman in the village to even the corrupt politician himself is complaining that, this Nigeria, and all of that. And so if we all recognize there is a problem, then you can then market that approach, and you can have that contract, because that is a problem, is not a doubt. As Reverend Kuka once mentioned, somebody that was in a thief that harassed somebody and said, "Where is your money?" Man removed his jacket, his shirt, his shoes, his socks. They couldn't find any money. So at the end, out of irritation, the thief just used the nozzle of his gun, push the man's boxers down, and there was the money. And the thief goes like, "That's the problem with Nigeria. Simple truth. You people cannot." So you can imagine the thief having the moral authority. So even the thief does recognize that there's a problem, and yet he's stealing. Yeah. So we all know there's a problem. And I think it makes people more susceptible to that willingness to believe if you can show them enough. I think Nigeria is ripe for that leader that will wake us up. But we're in lethargy, and we need something to spark us. But everybody knows there's a problem.
Yeah, so and if we have a problem and nobody wants to solve it because it favors the ruling class the way the people are today, and then the people who are on the receiving end, to them, that's all they can do. So somebody who is down needs to fear no fall. My worry is, how do we get to educate people at that lower level? That it's not, you can't just every 4 years I give you 5,000 naira, and then for the next 4 years you starve. Or the next election, I come back and give 5,000 naira. Then somebody comes, said, look at my program, I'm going to make you rich. I'm going to empower you. That instead of giving you fish, let me teach you how to fish.
Exactly.
So how do we get Nigerians to come to that level? That is where we ought to be.
No, but we ought to be. For instance,
my own is that from the way things are, it takes 1 or 2 people to make a change in a country. From the way the things are in Nigeria today, both APC and PDP cannot save Nigeria. They cannot. Their focus is on money, because when you have money, you become the only crowing cock in that place, and that is the way Nigeria is now. If I want to mention them. Everybody in Nigeria today who has become a governor become the richest man in his states. As soon as he's leaving office, as soon as he left office, he become the richest in the states. They use that office to acquire wealth. Take over the state resources, and when they go, they want to put somebody who they can, who is pliable. So where are we going? How do we make sure that Nigerians, this violence is being the pressure is because of people are starving. People are on the receiving end of society. How would they come to realization that these people are not working for us? Let's not be supporting them. Let's work against them. Like, look at what happened in Sudan today. The man had been there for 30 years. People say enough is enough. They rose. Now, if they handle it properly, the society will become better. As you mentioned, Rwanda. Rwanda was also a failed state. Today, it is an example. It's used as an example. So how do we go forward?
I think I'm one of those people who often believe that Nigerians, I'm sorry to say with due respect, are cowards. We have what it takes when we had the June 12th Abiola issue, people went out on the street and demonstrated. I think the masses have the power. Okay? There's a song by Bob Marley. Everybody wants to, what's that again? But nobody wants to die. Now, the point I'm trying to make is this. Lives and sacrifice has to be made for us to get to where we're going to. It has to be. There's no way we can wrestle power from those who have held us bondage, and that's simply what it is. We have to change. We have a civic duty individually. And sometimes I think it perhaps might be too far-fetched to say, okay, fine, let's look up to these politicians who are responsible for our plight today. Perhaps we individually need to start educating those who we feel, or the masses, and sort of empower them in our little ways. It may be the way I will do business when I'm back in Nigeria. It may be the fact that I will refuse to give bribe or kickbacks. And then those around me would understand that if I was to perform my duty, you don't need to give me money for it. There are people like that. So it's just little pockets, but I think ultimately it will make a change. But for that to happen, we need to within ourselves realize and take that step to do that.
Yeah, in order not to lose sight we are talking about violence across the world and in Nigeria in particular. From what we have discussed so far, violence is not good. There are things that lead to violence. I mean, people become violent, and there are some pressures that make people become violent, and we can see that some countries we have referred to before as failed states. For example, Somalia. At a point in time, Rwanda, they had to fight a war. They began like what is happening in Nigeria today. You have pockets of violence here and there. People, militias here and there. At every level of society, you have gangs. You have everywhere. The society is militarized. Do we have that kind of? Do you foresee, or are you seeing signs of failed states in Nigeria today? Can you respond to that, Patience?
No, I don't think Nigeria will ever be a failed state. I mean, if we go past 2015. Now, having said that, like I said, it's not one thing. It's our loss of value. You know, you mentioned the issue of money, how money has become people's gods. It is, nobody's asking us questions. Nobody's saying, oh, how do you afford a 10 million naira car and a 100,000 naira salary? We're not being asked the questions we should ask. Society doesn't care.
Yeah.
Churches are not asking us where our tithes and offering are coming from. You know, it's that value system again. What kind of education are we receiving? And I'm not just talking of formal education. I'm talking of the informal education as well. I don't think we'll degenerate into a failed state because...
Remember, I'm sorry, the issue of kidnapping in Nigeria.
I do.
The issue of armed robbery in Nigeria. The issue of looting and
I will
lawlessness in Nigeria.
I will counter that for you, that as a person living in Nigeria, there's a rising awareness. People are more bothered. People are voting more. You know, yes, we're looking at the negatives of the last election, the suppressions, Igbos not being allowed to vote in Lagos, in several other places. But I'm also looking at the fact that the margins are tightening in the elections. You don't have those crazy, I think Rivers State was the craziest result. You don't have those crazy, one person will have maybe 50,000, the other one will have 900,000. People now know that it matters. Nobody is seizing. So those things are turning the tide. There's more awareness. You're meeting villagers saying they are going to vote. In fact, but for the fact of the tripartite problem of INEC, the enforcement of authorities, and the political class, INEC in the sense of even the kind of jingles they are running are not serious enough. Run these jingles in pidgin. Run it in native language. Push it more and more. Political authorities in the sense that be independent. Don't work for a particular person. Okay, let's...
Okay, we have a caller. Yeah. A caller is on the line. Hello, Madu.
Good evening.
Good evening,
my
Madu.
sister and my gentleman friend.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Your contribution is very welcome in terms of crime we have in Nigeria. In criminal justice system, you have crime and punishment. The punishment is the sanction. If you have no sanction against any crime, it's not the law. So who has ever been punished in all these affairs of rigging, embezzlement, racketeering? Nobody. You get the so-called kidnappers, or they will be taking the policemen to court and what have you. Let's wind the clock back in the 70s after Nigeria's Biafra War. They had in place a robust system to punish any offenders. Armed robbery, firing squad at the bar beach. No lawyers to enrich their pockets. If we do not go the way the Chinese go with their past leaders, corrupt leaders, Nigeria can never be sanitized. There must be punishment. I have never received any news about, oh, this is somebody from the last regime, or they've been found guilty, and this is a punishment. If we have no punishment in any country, it's no law. If you go into the tube station or train, oh, you smoke, the penalty, 100 pounds. The penalty is a sanction. You tell me the sanction we have in Nigeria as punishment for these so-called leaders. It will ever continue. We must start somewhere. There is no need for us to be saying, well, after it's one of us. One of you for what? Look, firing squad, are they tired of, have they run out of bullets? I don't want capital punishment, but if that is what is going to sanitize Nigeria, so let it be. We are not thinking on, this is people's life. Now you can kill a chicken, they put in a tie around your neck, but you see still billions. Oh, you'll be made a hero. It's ridiculous. Please, let us bring back firing squad for any type of crime, including rape of girls, women. It's ridiculous. Look, I love Nigeria. I grew up there. I knew when Zika Wolowo and the rest of them, they weren't playing politics for in terms of tribes or religion. People were happy. LP Ojukwu made his money as a transporter, Ojukwu Transport Limited, at Sabo Market. The man usually wakes up 6 o'clock in the morning. You see him. Now, everybody wants to become a millionaire. 6 o'clock in Nigeria, nobody goes out to see friends. It's dark because you're afraid of the dark. Who made it dangerous?
Mado, are you advocating the Chinese example?
So please, let us find out what the Constitution says about time and punishment. Firing squad.
Firing squad. Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Madu.
Okay.
I just wanted to remind you that
do you hear what
we
he
still
said?
have the death penalty on the books. Nobody has said there's death penalty, albeit there's a reluctance to use it. I remember
no, but there's no death penalty for politicians.
Watching the gallows in Edo State, and everybody was like, "You want to start cutting people off?" No, there are penalties. It's a structural thing. This Ojukwu he mentioned, there was a time I think Ojukwu's properties were confiscated.
Yeah.
Then it became a major case. The courts were able to say, no, you can't do that, you know, and all of that. And that's part of the problem, that lack of independence. You know, before I was alluding to it being a tripartite problem. Is the police independent? Is the military independent? When police comes to monitor election, when police are called in issues relating to violence, do they really have that independence? Can the police pick up a governor on the basis of evidence and all of that?
No.
But I have a lot of hope that because there's more awareness in the country, it's not that bad. In some states, it's getting better. But again, sometimes, I remember I think just previous to Fashola, there was a time kidnapping was so much in the rage. And they got this commissioner of police, I've forgotten his name. He would literally tell you, bring that kidnapper, I will find him. Which means that these things can be done. And he will tell you of how they trace them as far as Ghana, as far as Interpol. It's not rocket science. If there's that willingness, you know, things are not as dire in Nigeria as we think. I choose to be the optimist here.
Yeah, but we have instances. I know I can tell you about 10 stories here about people who have been kidnapped and they went to the police. Police said, we don't have, give us money to go and locate them. They asked someone who has come to make a report give you money to go.
But has government taken a policy this thing? Because for instance, you can trace these things. I remember having an argument with my internet service providers. You want,
yeah, go ahead.
You know, you want all my details when I'm to register. I tell you my modem is missing. Someone is paying money and using the modem, and you tell me you can't trace it. If there's a policy drive, if there's a deliberate attempt to push these things, it's actually possible. And don't forget, kidnapping again, back to family values. Most times for you to be kidnapped,
we are running out of time. 10 seconds. Do you support that Chinese model? Leaders should be dealt with?
I'm minded to say that I support it, but I think there are better ways.
There are better ways
of addressing the issue, and I think it has to. We all have to take steps.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to the program. Maybe next week we have to we start from where we stopped today. Next time. So viewers, we want to thank you for tuning in today. Next week we'll be around. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.
Man is all into here on Newspunch to give you the information that you need from business